There is a number that emergency managers watch more closely than almost any other during fire season. And right now that number has climbed to a place that should alarm everyone. More than 80 major wildfires are burning uncontained across the United States at the same time, and the nation's firefighting system, the vast, coordinated machine built to throw crews and aircraft at these fires, is being stretched toward a breaking point experts have long warned about. This is what a wildfire response nearing collapse looks like. Not a single catastrophic fire, but too many fires at once, all demanding help from a pool of resources never large enough to fight them all. And understanding why this happens, and why it happens more and more often, reveals one of the most important and least understood truths about the modern wildfire crisis in America. The system behind the firefight to grasp why more than 80 uncontained fires is so dangerous. You first have to understand how wildfire response in America actually works, because it is not what most people imagine. People tend to picture firefighting as a local affair, a town's fire department rushing to a blaze. But major wildfires are fought by a national system, a sophisticated and highly organized apparatus that pulls the country's firefighting resources and dispatches them to wherever the need is greatest. This system exists precisely because no single county, no single state, could ever hope to maintain enough crews and aircraft to handle a large fire on its own. So the nation shares. At the heart of this system is a national coordination structure that tracks every significant fire, ranks them by priority, and allocates the finite pool of resources accordingly. Those resources are the crown jewels of American firefighting, the elite hotshot crews, the smoke jumpers, the air tankers that drop retardant, the helicopters, the specialized incident management teams that run large fires, and the thousands of engines and dozers and personnel who do the physical work. In an ordinary situation, when only a handful of large fires are burning, this system works beautifully. A fire ignites, it draws on the national pool. Crews and aircraft pour in from across the country, and the fire is brought under control. The sharing model means that resources can be concentrated where they are needed, surging to meet each emergency in turn. But the entire model rests on a single crucial assumption, that not too many fires will burn at once, and when that assumption breaks. When 80 or more major fires ignite and burn uncontained simultaneously, the whole system is pushed into crisis. When everything burns at once here is the heart of the matter. The national firefighting system is built around the idea of moving resources to wherever they are most needed. That works when the fires are spread out in time. When one region's emergency can be met with another region's idle crews. But it falls apart when everything burns at once, because then there is no idle capacity anywhere to draw upon. Every crew is already committed. Every air tanker is already flying. Every incident management team is already running a fire, when more than 80 major fires are burning uncontained at the same time. The pool of shared resources is simply exhausted, spread so thin across so many fires that no single fire gets what it truly needs. This is the scenario that pushes the system toward collapse, and it forces the people who manage the national response into an agonizing position: triage. Just as doctors in an overwhelmed emergency room must decide which patients get treated first, fire managers facing dozens of simultaneous fires must decide which fires get the crews and the aircraft, and which must be left to burn with whatever is left over, or with almost nothing at all. Fires are ranked by the threat they pose to human life and to communities, so a fire bearing down on a town will rightly take priority over a fire burning in remote wilderness. But the brutal reality is that when the resources run out, some fires that could have been stopped when they were small are instead left to grow, because every available crew is committed elsewhere to a fire that is even more urgent. The triage is rational and necessary, but its consequence is that fires escape, grow into monsters, and do damage that earlier intervention might have prevented. The system does not fail all at once in a dramatic collapse. It fails quietly, fire by fire, as the resources that might have contained each one are simply not there. Why uncontained is the word that matters. The word at the center of this crisis is uncontained, and it carries a weight that is easy to miss. Containment, in firefighting, does not mean a fire is extinguished. It refers to the perimeter, the portion of a fire's edge that has a completed control line around it, a barrier the fire is not expected to cross. A fire that is uncontained, or has very low containment, is a fire whose edges are still open and advancing, still capable of running, still growing. So when we say there are more than 80 major uncontained fires, we are describing more than 80 large fires that are still actively spreading, still out of control, still demanding resources to corral them. It is worth pausing on how misleading the containment number can be. When people hear that a fire is, say, 10% contained, they often imagine that 90% of it is still burning at full fury, while a tenth has gone out. That is not what it means. It means only that a tenth of the fire's outer edge has a secured line around it, while the other 90% of the perimeter remains open and capable of advancing. On a large fire, that perimeter can stretch for 100 miles or more, so even a small containment percentage can represent an enormous amount of hard-won work. And a fire can be partially contained while still growing rapidly along its open edges. Multiply that across more than 80 fires, and the scale of active fire line across the country becomes almost impossible to comprehend. The reason so many fires can be uncontained at once ties directly back to the resource crisis. Containing a fire requires people and equipment, crews to build line, dozzers to cut it, aircraft to slow the fire's advance so the crews can work. When the resources are exhausted across too many simultaneous fires, containment slows to a crawl on all of them, because none of them has enough hands to build line fast enough. A fire that might have been surrounded and contained quickly with a full complement of crews instead sits at low containment for days or weeks, growing all the while, because the crews it needs are fighting other fires. So the very shortage of resources that defines the crisis also perpetuates it. The fires stay uncontained longer because there are not enough resources. And the longer they stay uncontained, the more resources they ultimately demand, deepening the shortage further. It is a vicious cycle, and a high count of uncontained fires is the clearest possible signal that the system is being overwhelmed. The exhaustion of the human machine behind all the talk of resources and systems. It is essential to remember that the most important resource of all is human beings, and human beings have limits that no logistics can overcome. Wildland firefighting is among the most physically demanding and dangerous work there is, carried out in brutal heat and choking smoke, on steep terrain, for shifts that stretch to 16 hours and beyond, day after day. When the nation faces a fire siege of this magnitude, with 80 or more major fires burning at once, the toll on the firefighters themselves becomes one of the gravest concerns of all, and one of the surest signs that the system is nearing collapse. The problem is that there are only so many trained wildland firefighters in the country, and during a siege like this, every one of them is needed, often for weeks on end with little rest. Crews are moved from fire to fire, worked to exhaustion, and asked to keep going long after their bodies and minds are spent. Fatigue is not merely a matter of comfort, it is a safety crisis. Because exhausted firefighters make mistakes, and mistakes on a fireground can be fatal. The relentless pace of a season with this many fires wears down the workforce, and there is no reserve of fresh crews waiting to relieve them because they are all already committed. Compounding this is a deeper, long-term problem experts have warned about for years: the difficulty of recruiting and retaining enough wildland firefighters at all. The work is grueling, the pay has often been inadequate for the danger involved, and the seasons have grown longer and more punishing, driving people out of the profession and making it harder to fill the ranks. So the human machine at the core of the firefighting system is not only being pushed to exhaustion in the moment, it is being steadily depleted over time, leaving fewer people to face ever more fire. When the crews run out, there is no substitute, and a system that has run out of firefighters is a system that has truly reached its limit. Why this keeps getting worse a season, with more than 80 major uncontained fires, is not a freak accident. It is the increasingly common product of forces that have been building for decades, and understanding them explains why the wildfire response system is being pushed toward collapse more and more often. Several powerful trends are converging, each one amplifying the others, to produce fire seasons that overwhelm the nation's capacity to respond. The first is the warming and drying of the American West and beyond. Rising temperatures pull moisture out of the soil and the vegetation, curing forests and grasslands into ready fuel and extending the fire season longer at both ends. What was once a fire season of a few months has stretched toward a year-round threat in some places, giving the fires more time to burn and the system less time to recover between them. The second is the accumulation of fuel in the landscape. A century of aggressive fire suppression, the policy of putting out every fire as quickly as possible, allowed vast quantities of vegetation to build up in forests that had evolved to burn regularly at lower intensity. Combined with the toll of drought and insect infestations that have killed enormous stands of trees, many landscapes are now dangerously overloaded with fuel, primed to carry fires far larger and more intense than they would have seen naturally. The third is the expansion of human development into fire-prone areas, the growing zone where homes and communities press up against the wildland. This means more fires started by human activity and vastly more at stake when a fire runs, forcing the response system to commit ever more resources to protecting lives and property. Put these forces together, and the result is inevitable: more fires, larger and more intense, burning over a longer season, threatening more people, all at once. The number of fires that can ignite and grow simultaneously has risen, while the capacity of the response system has not kept pace. And so the days when 80 or more major fires burn uncontained at the same time, once rare, have become a recurring feature of the American fire season, each one pushing the response system closer to the collapse that experts have warned is coming. The system was designed for a world with less fire, and that world is gone. The consequences of a stretched system. When the wildfire response system is stretched to its limit, the consequences ripple outward in ways that touch far more than the fires themselves, and they reveal just how much is at stake in keeping the system from collapsing. The most immediate consequence is that fires grow larger than they otherwise would, a fire that could have been caught small. When a few crews and an air tanker might have stopped it, instead grows into a major incident because those resources were committed elsewhere. Each fire that escapes early containment becomes larger, more destructive, and more expensive, consuming more resources in the end than it would have if stopped at the start, which only deepens the shortage for every other fire. The human consequences are the gravest. When resources are exhausted, the protection of communities becomes harder, and the risk to lives and homes rises. Evacuations become more critical because there may not be enough firefighters to hold a fire away from a town, making the early removal of people from the fire's path the most important line of defense. The economic toll mounts as well, the cost of fighting so many fires, the destruction of homes and infrastructure, the losses to agriculture and tourism and business across whole regions. And there is the smoke, which from dozens of major fires burning at once can blanket enormous swaths of the country, degrading air quality for tens of millions of people far from any flame, sending the vulnerable to hospitals, and turning the skies a sickly orange across entire regions. A wildfire response nearing collapse is not a distant problem confined to remote forests. Its effects reach into the lungs and livelihoods and safety of people across the nation. A reminder that when the system that fights fire is overwhelmed, everyone downwind pays a share of the price. What it would take to cope if the wildfire response system is being pushed toward collapse, the natural question is what could be done to prevent it, and the answer involves confronting the crisis on two fronts at once, strengthening the response and reducing the fire itself. Neither alone is enough, and both are enormous undertakings. But together, they represent the only real path away from the breaking point. Strengthening the response means, above all, investing in the people. It means recruiting and retaining more wildland firefighters, paying them properly for the danger of the work, and building a workforce large enough and rested enough to meet the demands of the modern fire season. It means expanding the fleet of aircraft and equipment and continuing to improve the coordination and technology that help direct resources where they are most needed. But there is a hard limit to how much any nation can afford to simply throw more firefighters and aircraft at a problem that keeps growing, which is why the second front is so essential. Reducing the fire itself means addressing the buildup of fuel in the landscape through carefully managed thinning and controlled burning, restoring forests to a healthier and less flammable condition. It means changing how and where we build, making homes more resistant to fire so that when a blaze does come, it does not demand such a desperate defense. And it means, in the largest sense, confronting the warming climate that is driving the whole escalation, because as long as the landscape grows hotter and drier, the fires will keep multiplying, no matter how many firefighters stand against them. The recognition growing among those who study and fight these fires is that we cannot simply suppress our way out of this crisis. The strategy of putting out every fire, which helped create the fuel buildup in the first place, cannot be sustained against a landscape and a climate producing ever more fire. The future must involve learning to live with fire, managing the landscape so that fire plays its natural role at a survivable intensity, and building communities that can withstand it, rather than relying entirely on an emergency system already stretched to its limit. That is a profound shift in how a nation relates to fire, and it will take time and will and resources to achieve. But the alternative, a response system that collapses under the weight of ever more fire, is a future that the seasons with 80 or more uncontained fires are showing us in real time. The warning in the numbers. More than 80 major fires burning uncontained at once is, in the end, a number that tells a story, and the story is a warning. It is the sound of a system built for a different era, straining against a reality it was never designed to handle. A machine that worked brilliantly when the fires were fewer, now asked to do the impossible as the fires multiply. Each season that pushes the response toward collapse is a signal that the old ways are reaching their limits, that the escalating forces of heat and fuel and development are outrunning the capacity to respond, and that something in the relationship between the nation and fire must change. The firefighters will keep doing extraordinary things. They will keep working the fires, protecting the communities, holding the lines they can hold, and pushing themselves past exhaustion in service of a task that grows harder every year. Their courage is not in question. What is in question is whether a system that depends on their heroism can keep functioning as the fires keep multiplying, and whether the nation will do what it takes both to support them and to reduce the fire that overwhelms them. The count of uncontained fires is a vital sign, and right now it is flashing a warning that should not be ignored. A wildfire response nearing historic collapse is not just a headline about a bad fire season. It is a glimpse of a future arriving faster than we are ready for, and a call to change course before the breaking point becomes the break.